Hola a todos los estudiantes de la clase de español 122. Soy el profesor Antón García Fernández. En este video vamos a ver el pretérito, the preterit, and we will deal with regular verbs, stem-changing verbs, and the verbs ir and ser, which have the same forms in the pretérito. El pretérito is a tense that we use to talk about actions that happened in the past, not in the present, not in the future, not today, not tomorrow, not next year, but yesterday, last night, last summer, 20 years ago, etc. We have regular verbs in the preterit, and those are most verbs actually in Spanish. Most verbs in Spanish in the preterit are regular, and they follow the endings that you have in red right there on your screen. All you have to do is you take out ar, or ir, and then add the correct preterit endings. It is very important to note that the and ir verbs have exactly the same endings in the preterit. So we have verbs here that we will conjugate in the preterit. El verbo hablar, hablé, hablaste, habló, hablamos, hablaron. Just like you do in the present, you take out ar and then you add the correct ending depending on who performed the action. The same thing happens with verbs ending in and ir, which, as I said before, share the same endings in the preterit, in the past. I will read comer because vivir follows exactly the same pattern. El verbo comer. Comí, comiste, comió, comimos, comieron. These are the regular verbs in the preterit, and most verbs are actually regular. So this is the way that you should conjugate most Spanish verbs in the preterit. However, we have stem-changing verbs, verbos con cambios en la raíz. Remember that some verbs in Spanish in the present have root changes. They go to IE or UE, and in some cases also to I. If we have stem-changing verbs that change their stem in the present, and these verbs end in ar or then these verbs are completely regular in the preterit. They follow exactly the same endings, exactly the same pattern that we just explained. Examples would be verbs like cerrar, to close. This is a verb that in the present has a change to IE. But as you can see, in the pretérito, because this verb ends in ar, there's absolutely no change. Cerré, cerraste, cerró, cerramos, cerraron. Same thing with the verb perder, meaning to lose. In the present, it has a change to IE. But because it ends in then the preterit has absolutely no change. Perdí, perdiste, perdió, perdimos, perdieron. The verb cerrar takes the endings for ar verbs. The verb perder takes the endings for verbs. Pero atención, and this is very important. If you have verbs that have changes in the root in the present, going to IE or going to UE in the present, and they end in ir, then they will also have changes in the preterite. But those two things have to happen. They have to have root changes in the present, and they have to end in ir. In that case, they will also have changes in the preterite. In fact, they will go to you if they are verbs that change to UE in the present, and they will go to I if they are verbs that go to IE in the present. You can see that right there on your screen. El verbo dormir, that's a verb that has a UE change in the present, and it ends in ir. Therefore, there's going to be a change in the preterito. But that change will only happen in the third form and in the fifth form. In the él, ella, usted form, the third form, or in the plural, ellos, ellas, ustedes form. In the rest of the forms, you have, as you can see, no change. Look how the change is highlighted in red on your screen. So, el verbo dormir, dormí, dormiste, durmió, there's the change. Dormimos, durmieron. There is the change again, only in the third and in the fifth forms. It's a verb that in the present goes to UE, it ends in ir, and therefore there is a change to u in the preterito, but only in the third form and in the fifth form. Similar situation with sentir, meaning to feel. There is an IE change in the present. The verb ends in ir, and so we will have a change also in the preterito to I, to E. So, sentir. Sentí, sentiste, sintió. There you have the change. Sentimos, sintieron. There you have the change again in the third, he, she form, and in the plural, they form. Note, though, that the endings of these verbs are the regular ir endings, because these are ir verbs. Now, we also have the verbs ir and ser. Ir meaning to go, ser meaning to be. These verbs have the same forms in the preterito, and they do not have accents. You could see that some of the forms, some of the endings of the preterito have accents, but the verbs ir and ser, which share the same forms in the preterito, they have no accent. And the forms are the following. For both verbs, for ir and ser, in the preterito, the forms are these. Tienen las mismas formas en el pretérito. The same forms. Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fueron. You can repeat after me. Por favor, repitan conmigo. Fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fueron. As you can see, the forms are the same for ir and for ser. So how do we know if we see a verb in a sentence and it is the verb ir or the verb ser? It looks confusing, but it's not, because if you look at these examples, you will see the difference. El verbo ir siempre tiene la preposición a. If it is the verb ir, it will always be followed by the preposition a. Por ejemplo, mis padres fueron a Italia el verano pasado. You see that a there, which is highlighted in blue, and you know that it has to be the verb ir. Mis padres fueron a Italia el verano pasado. My parents went to Italy last summer. So that is the verb ir, el verbo ir. Now the other example, the one underneath, you will see that it is el verbo ser. ¿Por qué? Porque el verbo ser no tiene a. Sin a. Without the a. Okay? Without the preposition a. Por ejemplo, la frase, los Beatles fueron una banda de rock muy famosa. You don't see an a. The preposition a is not following the verb, and therefore we don't have the verb ir, we have the verb ser. Los Beatles fueron una banda de rock muy famosa. The Beatles were a very famous rock band. That's the verb to be, el verbo ser. It is very important, in closing, that you learn the endings for these verbs in the Pretérito, because one of the main things we're going to do this semester is to use the Pretérito, to use the past. Last semester we worked mostly with the present, with things that you normally do, that you do every day, using the present. Now, in this class, in this semester, we're going to be working mostly with the past, with things that you did in the past. And for that, we're going to use, among other tenses, el pretérito. Please learn the endings for the pretérito, and you will see that things will be a lot easier for you this semester. Muchas gracias por su atención. Se despide el profesor Antón García Fernández.